The rain had been falling since sunset, the kind of cold, relentless rain that soaks through jackets and settles into your bones. It was nearly midnight when Daniel Harris turned his rusted pickup into the narrow alley behind the auto garage, where he worked extra hours for cash. His headlights swept across puddles, broken crates, and then suddenly froze on something that made his foot slam the brakes. A woman was curled against the brick wall, her coat torn and darkened with blood, shielding a small boy who clung to her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. Daniel's heart dropped into his stomach. He had seen a lot in his life: eviction notices, empty fridges, his own daughter crying herself to sleep. But nothing prepared him for the sight of a beaten mother and child, abandoned like trash in the cold. Before we go any further, if you're watching this story and you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because kindness still matters. Daniel was a poor single dad, barely holding things together, after his wife died 3 years earlier from a sudden illness that left him with hospital bills bigger than his annual income. Every morning before dawn, he packed his daughter Lily's lunch with whatever he could find, walked her to the neighbor's apartment, and then worked 10-hour shifts at the garage, his hands cracked and stained with oil. At night, he drove for delivery apps until exhaustion blurred his vision. He lived day to day, one unexpected expense away from disaster, and yet, without thinking twice, he stepped out into the rain and walked toward the woman and child. The woman looked up with fear in her eyes, as if expecting another blow. Her face was bruised badly, one eye swollen nearly shut, her lips split. The boy, maybe 6 or 7, had blood dried into his hair and a look no child should ever carry. Daniel raised his hands slowly, his voice calm, his movements careful. He didn't ask questions. He didn't judge. He took off his own jacket and wrapped it around the boy, feeling the child shiver violently. He called an ambulance, waited with them in the rain, and when the paramedics arrived, he insisted on following them to the hospital, even though it meant missing a night of deliveries he desperately needed. At the emergency room, Daniel sat on a plastic chair for hours, watching fluorescent lights hum overhead while nurses rushed past. He learned their names were Elena and her son, Mateo. She barely spoke, her voice hoarse and fragile, but she thanked him again and again, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Daniel told her she didn't owe him anything. He knew what it felt like to be helpless. He knew what it meant to have no one show up for you. When the social worker came, Daniel gave his contact information, offered to help however he could, even though he had nothing to offer except time and a beat-up truck. The days that followed were hard. Daniel's car needed repairs he couldn't afford, Lily needed new school shoes, and the garage owner warned him about taking time off. Still, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Elena and Mateo. He called the hospital to check on them, bringing home, made soup and cheap coloring books for the boy. Elena's injuries were serious but healing. What puzzled Daniel was her quiet dignity. Despite everything, she carried herself with a strange calm, as if she were used to responsibility, to power even, though she wore it lightly. One afternoon, Daniel received a call that changed everything. A man with a firm, professional voice asked him to come to a downtown office building. Daniel almost hung up, thinking it was a scam. He hadn't given anyone his information except the hospital, but curiosity and concern pushed him to go. He borrowed gas money, put on his cleanest shirt, and drove into a part of the city he usually avoided because it reminded him of everything he didn't have. The building was tall, all glass and steel, with security guards and marble floors. Daniel felt painfully out of place. He was escorted to a conference room where Elena sat, looking healthier but still marked by fading bruises. She smiled at him, and for the first time, Daniel noticed how composed she truly was. Around her stood lawyers, executives, and men in tailored suits. That was when he learned the truth. Elena was Elena Vasquez, daughter of the founder of one of the largest privately held oil companies in the region, an empire worth billions. Mateo was the sole heir after her. The man who had beaten her was her estranged husband, a powerful figure who had tried to control her inheritance and erase her identity. When she refused, he left her for dead, assuming no one would help a woman stripped of her status. Daniel sat there in shock, his mind struggling to catch up. He felt embarrassed, suddenly aware of his worn boots and calloused hands. Elena stood and thanked him again, but this time her gratitude carried weight. She told everyone in the room that Daniel Harris was the reason she and her son were alive, that without his kindness, they would have frozen or bled to death in that alley. The room fell silent. For the first time in years, Daniel felt seen. But the story didn't turn into instant riches or fairy tale endings. Elena offered help, yes, but Daniel hesitated. Pride and fear wrestled inside him. He didn't want charity. He didn't want strings. Elena understood. She didn't offer him money outright. Instead, she asked him what he dreamed of before life broke him down. Daniel talked about his daughter, about wanting stability, about wishing he could own a small repair shop, so he could control his hours and be there for Lily. Elena listened closely, not as a billionaire, but as a mother who had nearly lost everything. Weeks passed. Legal battles unfolded behind the scenes. News outlets whispered about the scandal, but Daniel stayed away from cameras. He focused on Lily, who noticed her father smiling more, standing taller. One evening, Daniel was invited back to the office building. This time, Elena explained that she was starting a foundation focused on domestic violence, survivors, and second chances. She wanted Daniel to run the community outreach and vocational training program, helping people rebuild their lives through honest work. She also arranged low-interest funding for him to open that small garage he once dreamed about. No ownership taken, no hidden conditions. Just trust. Daniel cried that night, quietly, alone in his truck. Not because of the opportunity, but because someone believed in him. Because kindness he gave without expecting anything had come back multiplied. Lily hugged him tightly when he told her, her small arms wrapping around his waist, her laughter filling the cramped apartment that suddenly didn't feel so hopeless. As the months rolled on, Daniel's life changed, not overnight, but steadily. The garage opened. He hired people who needed second chances. Elena visited sometimes with Mateo, who laughed more now, who slept without nightmares. Daniel and Elena didn't become fairy tale lovers or dramatic headlines. They became something deeper, two adults bonded by survival, respect, and the understanding that power means nothing without compassion. Just before we reach the end of this story, take a moment to comment below and share what part of this journey moved you the most. Your words matter more than you know. On the anniversary of that rainy night, Daniel drove past the alley behind the old garage. It looked the same, dark, forgotten, unimportant to the world. He parked for a moment and sat quietly, remembering how close everything had been to ending there. He thought about how easy it would have been to drive away, to tell himself it wasn't his problem. Instead, one choice had rippled outward, touching lives he never imagined. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can exist even in the hardest moments, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this only live on when you help spread them. Daniel never became a billionaire. He never needed to. He became something far richer, a man who proved that humanity still has a pulse, that even in alleys soaked with rain and pain, one person can choose to stop, to care, and to change the direction of many lives forever.